The coffee shop on 5th and Morrison smelled like burnt sugar and lies. I knew this because I'd been coming here for 3 months, and something about the place had always felt wrong, the way the barista's eyes followed certain customers, how conversations would stop the moment the bell above the door chimed, how a man in an expensive gray suit would sit in the corner booth every Tuesday at 2 p.m. and never order anything. Today was Tuesday. I was there because I had nowhere else to be. My job as a freelance architect had evaporated 3 weeks ago when my firm imploded something about embezzlement. Though no one would explain the details to me directly, I was innocent. I knew that, but innocence doesn't pay rent. The man in the gray suit was reading a newspaper. No one reads newspapers anymore. It struck me as performative, like he was playing a role in a film noir that didn't exist anymore. He turned a page. His hands were steady, manicured but calloused. A scar ran across his knuckles. Thin, deliberate, old. I should have looked away. Instead, I stared. "You're very obvious about it," he said, not looking up from the newspaper. His voice was low, textured like gravel wrapped in velvet. Staring. It's not subtle. My heartbeat did something violent in my chest. I started, then stopped. Lying felt pointless. "You looked interesting." Now he looked up. His eyes were the color of stormlight, gray-blue. The kind of color that shouldn't exist in a human face but somehow did. He had the bone structure of someone designed to be dangerous. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, a mouth that suggested he'd never smiled without calculation. But it was his eyes that made my breath catch. There was intelligence there. Predatory intelligence. "Interesting," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "That's not what people usually call me." "What do they usually call you?" He folded the newspaper with deliberate slowness. "Boss." The air in the coffee shop seemed to compress. I suddenly became aware of everything, the hum of the espresso machine, the couple in the corner pretending not to listen, the barista's rigid shoulders, even the burnt sugar smell seemed sharper. "I'm Vittoria," he continued, standing. He was tall. Tall enough that the coffee shop suddenly felt smaller. He wore the suit like a second skin, tailored so precisely, it looked like it had been poured over him. "And I'm going to do something very dangerous." My mouth went dry. "What?" "I'm going to give you my number." He placed a card on my table with 2 fingers, a gesture that felt like foreplay. Black cardstock, white lettering, a phone number, nothing else. "Don't call it," he said, "unless you're sure." "Sure of what?" His eyes found mine again, and the predatory thing in them shifted into something else, something that looked almost like hunger. "That you want to know what you're sensing." Then he left. The coffee shop exhaled. Conversations resumed. The couple stopped pretending. The barista relaxed incrementally. It was like watching reality reset after a power outage. I picked up the card with shaking hands. The cardstock was expensive, cream-colored, somehow warm despite its paleness. My thumb traced the embossed number. There was no name, no address, no social media handle or email. Just 12 digits that felt like a choice point in my life. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on my bed in my studio apartment, rent due in 2 weeks. Money in my account sufficient for maybe 3 weeks beyond that, and I turned the card over and over in my hands. He was beautiful in a way that scared me. Beautiful in a way that suggested violence. There was something off about him. Something that my nervous system recognized and flagged, even while my brain insisted he was just a man in an expensive suit who'd flirted with me in a coffee shop. Just a man. But his hands had scars, and his eyes had seen things. And when he'd said boss, something in the coffee shop had shifted, like he'd touched the walls and found them hollow. I fell asleep holding the card against my chest. The next day, I went back to the coffee shop. He wasn't there. The booth sat empty. A small ceramic cup abandoned on the table coffee, cold, untouched. The barista refilled it without asking who it was for. I came back Thursday, Friday, Monday. The booth remained empty. The untouched coffee was replaced daily, always at the same time, always cold by the afternoon. It was like he'd left a ghost behind. On Wednesday of the second week, something changed. I was working on freelance projects, small architectural renderings for boutique firms, work that barely paid, when my phone rang. Unknown number. My hands trembled as I answered. "You came back," he said. No hello, no introduction. Like he could see through walls. "How did you—" "The barista. She tells me things." His voice was quieter through the phone, more dangerous somehow. "You've been there 4 times. You sit in the seat facing the door. You watch the exit routes and check your phone like you're waiting for bad news. That's stalking, I whispered. Yes, he agreed, and there was something almost like amusement in his tone. I'm also going to tell you something, and then you're going to have to decide if you want to know more. Once you know, you can't unknow it. My apartment suddenly felt very small. I could hear my own breathing. What do you want to tell me? I asked. There was silence on the line, long enough that I thought he'd hung up. Then, your firm didn't collapse by accident. They were using it as a front. Money laundering. The embezzlement was real, but it wasn't about greed. It was about survival. One of your partners owed me money. I collected. Your firm became collateral damage. The room tilted. You destroyed my life, I breathed. I gave you an opportunity, he corrected. You could have been in that office when I decided to collect. Instead, you were already gone. I made sure of it. Why? Another pause. Because you looked interesting, he said. Same reason you stared at me in the coffee shop. And now you're going to come to dinner? And you're going to ask me all the questions you're too afraid to ask right now? Or you're going to throw that card away and spend the rest of your life wondering if you made the right choice? He hung up. I sat in the dark of my apartment, phone pressed to my ear against the dead line, and felt something like a trap spring shut around my heart. The thing was, I didn't throw away the card. His penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of a building that looked like a blade inserted into the skyline. I arrived at 8 p.m. on a Friday, wearing a black dress that cost 2 weeks of my dwindling rent fund and heels that made me almost tall enough to look him in the eye. My hands were steady. My heartbeat was not. The elevator rose in silence, floor numbers illuminating in descending order. Everyone paid to go down from his building. My reflection in the polished steel showed a woman I didn't quite recognize, sharp jawline, dark eyes that looked almost feral, lips pressed into a line. When the doors opened, I stepped directly into his space. The penthouse was exactly what I expected. Monochromatic, expensive, designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city sprawling below like something he owned. The furniture was minimal. A black couch, a glass table with nothing on it, a wall of books in languages I couldn't identify. Everything was clean, sterile almost, except for the art. The paintings that hung on his walls were violent. Abstract, yes, but violently so, slashes of red and black, colors that looked like they were fighting for dominance. One piece in particular caught my eye, a figure rendered in white against a background of darkness, arms raised as if surrendering or falling. Basquiat, he said, appearing from a doorway I hadn't noticed. I bought it from a collector in Prague. He didn't want to sell. I convinced him. How did you convince him? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. I asked nicely. He smiled, and it was terrifying, not because it was cruel, but because it made him look human, younger. Then I made it financially impossible for him to refuse. He was dressed differently than before, black turtleneck, tailored trousers, bare feet. The informality of the bare feet made him more dangerous somehow, like he was comfortable being vulnerable in his own space. The coffee shop barista, I said. You didn't ask her nicely about me. No, he admitted. I paid her, significantly more than she'd earn in a year. He moved toward the windows, and I followed. The city spread beneath us, lights twinkling like stars that had fallen to earth. You're wondering if everything you've learned about me in the past 2 weeks is true. Is it? Some of it. He turned to face me, and the predatory thing in his eyes was back, watching me with an intensity that made my skin feel too tight. Your boss, Marco Ricci, he owed me $4.2 million. He'd borrowed from my organization to cover gambling debts. When he couldn't pay, I made a decision about what to take instead. You destroyed his business. I destroyed his life. Vittoria corrected, still watching me. His business was already collapsing. The embezzlement wasn't orchestrated by me, that was Marco's own miscalculation. I simply accelerated the timeline. You lost your job. Marco lost his freedom. His family lost their savings. And that seems fair to you? The anger in my voice surprised me. Fear and anger are intimately connected. One can transform into the other without warning. I was transforming. It seems proportional, he said. He borrowed money he couldn't repay from the wrong people. There are consequences for that. I was innocent. I was just an architect trying to do her job. Yes. He stepped closer. Close enough that I could smell him, something like leather and expensive cologne, but underneath it, something darker. Something that smelled like gunpowder and ash. Which is why I made sure you were already gone when the collapse happened. You were warned. Internally. I mean, your instincts warned you something was wrong. You sensed it before you understood it. I simply validated what you already knew. I wanted to step back. My body refused. The coffee shop, I said. That card. That wasn't random. Nothing I do is random. His hand came up, and I thought for one shattering moment that he might touch me. Instead, his fingers hovered near my face, not quite making contact. I watched you for weeks before you came in. You'd walk past the building on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. You'd look up at my office windows. You'd never be able to see me, but I could see you. I could see that you were sensing something, that something in you recognized something dangerous. That's insane, I whispered. Yes. His fingers finally made contact, brushing a strand of hair from my face. The touch was electric, barely a whisper, but it made every nerve in my body scream. It is absolutely insane, which is why I gave you the card. A sane man would have let you walk away. Why didn't you? His hand dropped. Because sane men don't become what I am. Because the moment I saw you, something in me recognized something. And because, he paused, jaw tightening, because I wanted to see if you'd be brave enough to come. A sound interrupted us, sharp, metallic. A phone buzzing against glass. Vittoria's expression shifted. Something darker swept across his features. He moved away from me and retrieved his phone from the glass table. His jaw tightened as he read the screen. We have a situation, he said quietly. One of my men was found in the harbor. Dead. 2 hours ago. The way he said it, no emotion, no inflection, made it somehow more terrifying than any outburst could have been. I'm sorry, I said, the words feeling inadequate. Don't be. He was already moving toward the bedroom, already operating in a space I wasn't part of. Dinner will have to wait. I have work to attend to. What kind of work? He paused at the threshold, and when he looked back at me, his eyes were cold, completely empty of anything human. The kind that explains why you should be afraid of me, he said. The kind that proves I wasn't lying when I said I'm dangerous. He disappeared into the bedroom. I heard him on the phone moments later, voice low and rapid, words I couldn't catch but that sounded like death being discussed in casual terms. I stood alone in the penthouse, surrounded by violent art and expensive emptiness, and felt something shift inside me. Fear and attraction are not opposites. They are mirrors of each other, different reflections of the same desire to surrender control, and I was terrified that I was already surrendering mine. He didn't contact me for 5 days. The man found in the harbor had been named Gabriel, a lieutenant, according to the news reports I obsessively searched. There was no mention of Vittoria, no connection drawn, but the silence from him felt like a presence, a heavy thing pressing against my chest. On the 6th day, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Come to the warehouse on 10th, midnight. Come alone. I didn't go. I spent the evening pacing my studio apartment, the text glowing on my screen like an accusation. This was insane. This was criminal. This was everything my rational self screamed to avoid. At 11:47 p.m., I grabbed my jacket and left. The warehouse district was a graveyard at night, empty streets, broken windows, the skeletal remains of buildings that had forgotten their purpose. The warehouse he'd specified sat on a pier that extended into black water, its industrial doors corroded with age. I parked a block away and walked the rest, heels clicking against asphalt like a countdown. The door was unlocked. Inside, the space was vast and empty, except for Vittoria, tied to a chair. My breath caught in my throat. He was shirtless, and his body was a map of violence. Scars. So many scars. Some surgical, some deliberate. A bullet wound on his right shoulder, knife marks on his ribs, burn marks on his left side. His face was bloodied, a cut above his right eye, his lip split, his jaw swollen. But his eyes were clear, calm, waiting. Don't come closer, he said, his voice somehow steady despite the damage. There's someone else here. The gun was pressed against my spine before I heard the footsteps. Boss. A voice said male, accented, lethal. Who is she? A guest, Vittoria replied. Let her go. She could be a problem. She won't be. The pressure of the gun didn't release. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips, in my throat, in the small of my back. She's important, Vittoria continued. And something in his tone shifted. It became softer, dangerous in a completely different way. She's the only reason I'm giving you this opportunity to walk out of here alive. The gun lowered. Footsteps retreated. A back door slammed, and I was alone with a man tied to a chair, bleeding and calm, waiting for me to process what had just happened. What the hell? I started. That was Marcus. He's ambitious, difficult, but he respects strength. Vittoria was still bound, wrists secured with cable ties, ankles fastened to the chair legs. He should have looked vulnerable. Instead, he looked like a caged animal that could kill you if you got close enough. I had to show him that I'm still in control. Your presence here accomplished that. I could have been killed. Yes, he said, but you weren't. That tells Marcus something important about you, that you matter to me. Which means you matter to him. Which means you're protected now. I didn't ask for protection. My voice was shaking. Everything was shaking. I didn't ask for any of this. I know. He looked at me with those storm-colored eyes, and something in them was breaking, actually breaking. That's why you need to leave. Right now. Get in your car, drive to the airport, and get on the first flight to anywhere. Use cash. Don't look back. What? No. What about? There is no about, he interrupted. There's no future where you stay, and this ends well. There's no timeline where knowing me doesn't destroy you. I brought you here to show you the truth. The truth is that I'm going to die, and when I do, everyone close to me becomes a target. How do you know you're going to die? He smiled, and it was the saddest thing I'd ever seen, because that's how this ends for people like me, and because I've done unforgivable things. The people I've hurt, they have long memories. They have families. He pulled against the cable ties, testing them. They didn't give. Gabriel was my best friend. He was found in the harbor because someone wanted to send me a message. The message is, surrender or watch everyone you care about die. I moved toward him without consciously deciding to move. Stop, he said sharply. Don't. Let me help you. You help me by leaving. His voice was raw, desperate in a way that seemed impossible for someone like him. I brought you here to show you what's under the surface. Not because I wanted to seduce you, because I wanted to save you. I reached down and took the cable tie on his left wrist. It was industrial grade, not meant to break by hand, but there was a small, serrated edge on the edges where it had been cut, and I worked my fingers into the gap and pulled. It didn't break. But it loosened. Vittoria, don't say my name like that, he said roughly. Don't say it like you care. I stopped. I couldn't lie to him. Not after everything. I don't understand what I'm feeling. That's because you're feeling fear and desire at the same time, and your brain can't reconcile them. He looked at me with such intensity that I felt pinned. It's a biological response, trauma bonding. It's not real. But he said it while watching me work on the cable tie, making no actual effort to stop me, letting me free him piece by piece. The second tie snapped. Then the ones on his ankles. He stood, and without the chair between us, he was impossibly large, impossibly close. His bare chest rose and fell with heavy breathing, and I could see the scars more clearly now, each one a chapter in a story written in violence. Tell me something, I said, my voice barely a whisper. The night you gave me your card, was that about Marcus? About showing me off as some kind of protection? No. He reached out, and this time he did touch me, his hand cupping my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone with surprising gentleness. That was me being selfish. That was me wanting something of my own, that had nothing to do with death or power or control. Then don't make me leave. You don't understand what you're asking. Maybe I do, I said. Maybe that's terrifying, but it doesn't make it less true. He kissed me then, hard and desperate, like he was trying to communicate something his words couldn't contain. It tasted like blood and regret and something burning underneath. When he pulled away, his eyes were different, fractured. Tomorrow night, he said, there's a party. A gathering of all the families. You'll be there on my arm, which will make you a known associate. You'll become a target. You'll become part of this world permanently. There's no stepping back after that. I understand. Do you? He pulled me against him, his bare chest warm despite the cold warehouse. Can you understand what it means to love someone who traffics in death? I didn't answer. I just held him while the warehouse around us echoed with the weight of choices unmade. The party occupied the entire 48th floor of the Meridian Hotel. Crystal chandeliers cast fragmented light across, dressed in black figures that moved through the space like sharks in formal wear. Champagne flowed. Conversations happened in undertones. And everywhere there was the sense of violence held just barely beneath the surface. Vittoria had his hand on my lower back, a gesture that looked possessive and protective simultaneously. He dressed me in a red gown that felt like armor and confession, combined a color that said, "I'm with him. I'm claimed. I'm dangerous now too. Breathe," he whispered as we descended into the crowd. "And smile. You're supposed to look like you want to be here. How do you know I don't?" He leaned close enough that only I could hear. "Because every muscle in your body is tensed for violence. Your instincts know something your brain hasn't fully accepted yet." He wasn't wrong. The room was full of men I'd seen in news reports, in Wikipedia articles about organized crime, in documentaries about the underworld that touched the real world only peripherally. These were the architects of the underside of the city, the people who moved through darkness and made it bow to their will. And they were looking at me. "That's the Moretti family," Vittoria said, nodding toward a group of 5 men who stood like a unit. "Their territory runs from the docks to the financial district. They're currently considering whether to align with me or move against me." "How will they decide?" I asked. "By watching whether you flinch," he said simply. "By seeing whether I'm distracted by you or strengthened by you. Whether you're a weakness or a weapon." A woman approached us, tall, striking, with sharp, dark eyes that assessed me the way a jeweler might appraise a diamond for flaws. She had Vittoria's bone structure, which meant she was family. A sister, maybe, or a cousin. "Vittoria," she said, her voice warm but her eyes ice. "A companion. How unexpected." "Leonora." He kissed her cheek, his arm still around me. "You remember I have social skills. I remember you've never used them before." Her gaze locked onto mine. "What's your name, darling?" "Aria," I said. It was my real name, and somehow that felt important. Aria. Lovely. Leonora smiled, but it was the kind of smile that suggested she was mentally calculating my usefulness, or lack thereof. "And what does Aria do, besides stand beside one of the most dangerous men in this room looking like you're trying very hard not to panic?" "She's an architect," Vittoria said before I could answer. "And she's mine." The statement hung in the air like a declaration of war. Several conversations nearby stopped. People turned to look. The Moretti family's attention sharpened. "Interesting," Leonora said. "That's new. You don't do relationships, brother." "I do now." She studied me for a long moment, and I felt the weight of her scrutiny like a physical thing. Then she smiled, a real smile this time, almost warm. "Well," she said, "then I suppose we all need to be very careful with her, don't we? Since damaging her would be damaging you. And damaging you would start a war that no one wants to fight." She left before I could process that statement. "Your sister?" I asked. "Cousin. She runs operations in the Eastern Territory. She's testing me through you, seeing if my judgment is compromised." "And is it?" His hand tightened on my back. "Catastrophically." The party continued. Vittoria introduced me to people whose names I'd read in indictments, whose faces were familiar from mugshots. Each introduction felt like a choice point. Each time he presented me as mine, I could see the calculations shifting in people's eyes. I was becoming something, a marker of his power, a symbol of his willingness to have something worth protecting. It should have felt dehumanizing. Instead, it felt like the most honest thing that had happened since I'd met him. Around midnight, the atmosphere shifted. Subtle, but I felt it, a tightening of muscles across the room, a sudden focus directed toward the entrance. A man walked in that made Vittoria's entire body go rigid. He was older than Vittoria, silver-haired, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my car. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd never faced consequences. Behind him came 2 bodyguards, broad-shouldered men whose job was to make their presence felt. "That's Castellano," Vittoria said quietly. "The family head, the one who gave the order to kill Gabriel." "How do you know it was him?" "Because he just walked into my gathering without an invitation, which means he's here to either negotiate or escalate. And men like Castellano don't escalate without making it personal." Castellano's eyes found us across the room. His gaze traveled from Vittoria to me, and something shifted in his expression. Not surprise. Recognition. He walked toward us. Every instinct in my body screamed to run, but I kept my hand in Vittoria's, kept my breathing steady, kept my face calm. "Vittoria," Castellano said, his voice smoothly dangerous. "I was hoping you'd be here, and you brought a guest. How civilized of you." "Castellano, I didn't expect you. I would have had the kitchen prepare something special." Vittoria's voice was conversational, but I could feel the tension radiating from him like heat. "Oh, I'm not staying long. Just wanted to deliver a message." Castellano smiled, and his teeth were too white, too perfect. Gabriel was weak. He was skimming from the operation. He had to be eliminated. I hope you understand it was nothing personal. I understand completely, Vittoria said. His hand found mine, squeezed it once a signal. For what? I wasn't sure. In fact, I'm planning to send you a return message very soon. Ah. Castellano's smile widened. Is that so? And how do you plan to do that? You're outnumbered. Your operations are collapsing. Your suppliers are abandoning you. His eyes moved back to me. Distracted. That was when I understood. I understood why Vittoria had brought me. I understood what I represented in this space. I wasn't just a companion or a symbol. I was a vulnerability that Castellano was being given permission to exploit. Don't, I said quietly. Vittoria's grip on my hand tightened, but I pulled away anyway. I stepped forward, directly into Castellano's space, and met his eyes. Whatever you're planning to do, don't. Because I'm not his weakness. I'm his anchor. And when he retaliates, and he will, he'll do it with the kind of clarity that only comes from having something worth protecting. Castellano laughed. Actually laughed. The girl speaks, he said, spirited. I can see why you'd enjoy keeping her. He stepped back, gestured to his men. This will be interesting, Vittoria. Let's see how long you last before sentiment destroys you. They left. The party resumed, but the equilibrium had shifted. The Moretti family was watching us now with different eyes. Leonora was watching from across the room with something that might have been approval. Everyone was mentally revising their calculations. You shouldn't have done that, Vittoria said once we were in the elevator heading down. He was going to order my death. Yes, and I would have avenged it. That's how this works. I don't want to be avenged, I said. I want to survive, and I want you to survive. Which means we stop playing the game and start actually trying to win. He pulled me against him in the empty elevator, his face in my hair. You're asking me to change who I am, he said quietly. I'm asking you to fight like you have something to lose. You already do. The elevator doors opened. We stepped out into the city night, and both of us knew that the countdown had started. The safe house was a penthouse in a different building, not his usual territory, not anywhere connected to his known operations. He brought me there at 3 a.m., moving through the city with the kind of precision that suggested escape routes had been pre-planned. The apartment was already stocked with supplies. Someone had prepared it. Someone who knew this was coming. How long? I asked, looking around at the sparse furnishings and heavily tinted windows. Until Castellano makes his next move. Until I can respond without starting a citywide war. Vittoria moved to the window, careful not to stand directly in front of the glass. Days. Maybe a week. And we just stay here? Yes. The word hung between us, loaded with implications neither of us was ready to fully examine. We were together, actually together. Not at parties or warehouses in the mundane space of waiting, of existing in the same small area for hours at a time, with nothing but silence and each other. I discovered his habits in those early hours. The way he made coffee with absolute precision, measuring water like an engineer, how he read reports on his encrypted laptop at the kitchen table, occasionally making notes in a leather journal written in a language I didn't recognize, how he checked his phone constantly but never made calls, only received them, his responses monosyllabic. He discovered mine too, how I paced when I was anxious, moving through the apartment in patterns that probably had a mathematical structure if you mapped them, how I organized things, the books on the shelf by color, the kitchen utensils by function, how I talked to myself when I thought he wasn't listening, working through problems out loud like someone had to bear witness to my thinking. What are you planning? He asked me on the second evening. We were sitting on the couch, the only furniture besides the bed, the kitchen table, and a single chair. The television was off. The city sounds filtered in through the walls. What do you mean? You've been rearranging things since you arrived. Every time you touch something, it goes somewhere else. You're trying to build order out of chaos. You do that when you're trying to solve something. I hadn't realized he was paying that much attention. I'm thinking about Castellano, I admitted. About the fact that he's already a step ahead of you. He knew you'd come to the party. He knew you'd announce me publicly. He was probably counting on you getting emotionally invested in protecting me. And you're operating like you're alone. But you're not anymore. So, everything changes. Your strategy can't be about power or territory anymore. It has to be about outsmarting him in ways he's not expecting. Vittoria set down his coffee. Keep going. He thinks I'm a weakness because he thinks like a traditional criminal. He sees emotion as a liability. But what if we used that? What if instead of hiding me, We make sure he knows exactly how much you care. We make me so visible, so important, that any move against me becomes a move against your entire operation. We make me too expensive to kill. We make me too expensive to kill. That's insane, he said. That's the most dangerous thing I've heard. Yes, I agreed. But he won't expect it. That's the advantage. He was quiet for a long moment, and I could see the calculations happening behind his eyes, smart, vicious, necessary calculations. You're asking me to use you as bait. I'm asking you to use me as a chess piece. There's a difference. He stood abruptly and moved away from me, creating distance like it could solve the problem of what I was proposing. I brought you here to keep you safe. You brought me here because you were outnumbered and needed an advantage. Let me be that advantage. You don't understand what you're asking. If Castellano decides to move against you directly, if he decides you're worth the cost, then you'll protect me. I stood too, closing the distance he'd created. The same way you've been protecting me since the coffee shop. The same way you're going to keep protecting me, because that's who you are underneath all of this. You don't know who I am underneath all of this. I know you tied yourself to a chair so I could see you without the performance. I know you gave me an exit route when we were in that warehouse. I know you've kept me alive when you could have let me become collateral damage. So, yes, I do know who you are. And I'm betting my life on it. He reached for me then, and the touch was desperate. His hands found my face, holding me like I might disappear, like I was the only real thing in a world that had become negotiable. If anything happens to you, he started, and his voice broke on the words, then you'll burn the world down. I finished. I know. He kissed me then, and it was nothing like the kiss in the warehouse. This was terrified and tender and completely honest. This was a man who'd spent his entire life controlling everything, suddenly confronting something he couldn't control, his own need for another person. I was shaking when he pulled back. We move tomorrow, he said. You go public. I arrange interviews, appearances, places where Castellano's people will definitely see you. You become too visible to be invisible. And if it fails, then I get to do what I've been wanting to do since the moment I saw you in that coffee shop. I destroy everyone who would hurt you. The next 3 days were a symphony of exposure and control. Vittoria arranged for me to be photographed at restaurants, galleries, a charity event. Paparazzi were mysteriously tipped off about my presence. Social media accounts that had been dormant suddenly began posting images of us together. It was a brilliant strategy. I became a public figure in the criminal world, which meant any move against me had to be a statement, not a simple elimination. Between appearances, we returned to the safe house, to that small space where we existed in a bubble separate from the violence surrounding us. On the 4th night, we were in bed, actually in bed, sleeping beside each other, with all the complicated intimacy that required. I woke to find Vittoria standing at the window, illuminated by city light, watching the streets below like he could see danger coming. Can't sleep? I asked, moving to stand beside him, waiting for the next message. He wrapped an arm around me, pulling me against his side. Castellano's been quiet. That's more terrifying than if he'd retaliated directly. I leaned my head against him, listening to his heartbeat. It was steady, calm. Like the rest of him, it was a performance. Do you regret this? I asked. Bringing me in? Making me part of it? Every single moment, he said. And not at all. Regret is a luxury I can't afford. Not when the alternative is a world where you don't exist in my life. The city hummed around us. Somewhere out there, Castellano was planning. Somewhere in the network of organizations and betrayals, the next move was being calculated. But here, in the dark, with his heartbeat against my spine and his arm holding me like he'd dissolve if he let go here, we were safe. I knew it was temporary. I also knew it was worth whatever came next. The message came through his encrypted phone on the 5th morning. I watched his face as he read it, the way his jaw tightened, the way his eyes went flat and empty. Whatever it said, it was catastrophic. What? I asked. He handed me the phone without speaking. The message was in Italian. I don't speak Italian fluently, but I could parse enough. Your sister. We have her. 8 hours. Warehouse on Morrison. Come alone, or she dies. The words crystallized in the air like a curse. Leonora, he said. His voice was completely empty. Castellano has Leonora. I felt cold spread through my chest. How? She's careful. She'd have security. Which means he had inside help. Which means there's a leak in my organization. Which means... He cut himself off, moving away from me with violent energy. I have to get her back. You can't go alone. That's a trap. I know it's a trap. His hands were shaking. Actually shaking. I'd never seen him lose control like this. But Leonora is family, and if I don't go, she dies, and every family connected to me loses respect. It becomes open season. It becomes chaos. So we bring backup. We prepare. We don't walk blindly into. There is no we. He turned on me, and the pain in his eyes was raw enough to hurt to witness. This is exactly why this was a mistake. This is exactly what I was afraid of. You make me weak. You make me care about things that aren't about power or control, and it makes me slow and stupid, and I'm going to lose everything because I met you in a coffee shop. The words hit like a physical blow. That's not true, I said, but my voice was small. It's absolutely true. He was pacing now, running his hands through his hair in a gesture that was purely human and purely desperate. I was better when I didn't feel things. I was stronger. I got to where I am because I could hurt people without hesitation. And now I'm sitting here wondering what you're thinking, whether you're scared, whether you hate me for bringing you into this. And Leonora's in a cage because my priorities got rearranged. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him that wasn't how this worked. But fear and honesty are intimately connected, and I was terrified enough to be honest. Okay, I said quietly. Then what do we do? He looked at me like I'd suggested something obscene. What do you mean, we? You're going to stay here. You're going to sit in this apartment. And you're going to pack a bag with documents and money. And if I'm not back in 12 hours, you're going to disappear. Canada, Europe, somewhere Castellano can't follow. No, this isn't negotiable. I said no. I moved toward him, and something about my absolute refusal made him pause. You're not doing this alone. You're not walking into that warehouse without someone watching your back. And I'm the only person in this organization you can actually trust. Because I'm the only person who doesn't have anything to gain from your death. You have everything to lose. I know. I took his face in my hands, forcing him to look at me. And I'm choosing this anyway. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing to stand with you even though it's insane. But I'm not choosing to let you sacrifice yourself in some desperate grand gesture. We do this together, or we don't do it at all. For a moment, I thought he might argue. Then he pulled me into him, his face in my hair, breathing like he was drowning and I was the only thing keeping him afloat. If you die, he whispered, I will follow you. There's nothing on this earth that will keep me in it if you die. Then we don't die. I held him tighter. We figure this out, and we don't die. The 6 hours before the warehouse were the longest of my life. Vittoria called in favors. Quietly, carefully, he orchestrated a team without Castellano's knowledge. 2 snipers on the surrounding rooftops, tactical units positioned in the building next door, a secondary team stationed at every exit route from the warehouse to the harbor. It was meticulous and terrifying, and had all the hallmarks of someone planning either a rescue operation or his own funeral. At 7:45 p.m., we drove toward Morrison in a car that had been swept for tracking devices. Vittoria was silent beside me, hands steady on the wheel, eyes forward. The man who'd kissed me and broken in the dark was locked away somewhere. What remained was pure predator, all instinct and strategy and carefully controlled violence. When we get there, he said, you stay behind me. You don't speak. You don't move without my permission. You do exactly what I tell you, exactly when I tell you. Understood? I mean it, Arya. Complete obedience. This isn't a negotiation. I understand, I repeated. He reached over and squeezed my hand once, a gesture that said everything his controlled voice couldn't. The warehouse loomed ahead, dark and massive against the twilight sky. Castellano's men were visible outside, 3 of them, armed, watching the approach. Vittoria parked 50 yards away and stepped out slowly, hands visible. I followed, heart slamming against my ribs. One of the men walked toward us. Just him, he said. The girl stays outside. The girl stays with me, Vittoria said. His voice was calm. She's part of my answer. The man laughed. Castellano said you'd be sentimental. He said love would make you stupid. It did, Vittoria agreed. It made me stupid enough to walk into a room with no backup, but it also made me desperate enough to do something you won't expect. He moved forward, and I moved with him. Inside the warehouse, Leonora was tied to a chair identical to the one they'd used on Vittoria. She was bleeding from a split lip, and her eyes were angry, but she was alive. Castellano stood beside her, flanked by 6 men. His smile was the smile of someone who believed he'd already won. Vittoria, he said warmly. "And you brought the girl? How romantic. How stupid. I now have two of you. You have what I wanted you to think you have," Vittoria said. And then he moved. The world exploded into violence. The snipers took out the men on the rooftops simultaneously. The tactical unit burst through the warehouse doors. But Vittoria was already moving. He'd covered the distance between himself and Castellano in 3 steps. And the move that followed was beautiful and terrible. He didn't use a gun. He used his hands that had held me, hands that had touched my face with careful tenderness, now wielded as weapons. Castellano went down in seconds, gasping. Leonora was free before I could process what had happened, moving with the kind of lethal grace that suggested she was just as dangerous as her cousin. It was over in 90 seconds. When the dust settled, Castellano was alive but incapacitated. His men were either surrendering or bleeding, and Vittoria was helping his sister to her feet. He looked at me across the warehouse floor, and in his eyes was the understanding that everything had changed. I'd crossed from observer to participant. I'd stood beside him through violence. I'd committed myself to a world that most people only saw in movies. There was no coming back from this. He walked toward me, and I saw the cut on his cheek, the way his knuckles were scraped raw. "You're safe now," he said. "Castellano's organization is dismantled. The families will respect the power play. You're safe. Are you?" I asked. He pulled me toward him, and I felt him shake. Actually shake. "No," he admitted. "I'm falling apart because the only thing keeping me sane is touching you. I'm terrified that tomorrow something will change and you'll leave. I'm completely and utterly controlled by someone else for the first time in my life, and it feels like freedom." "Then don't let me go," I whispered. "Never," he promised. Leonora cleared her throat from across the warehouse. "This is very touching, but we should probably move before the police arrive." The safe house changed after that night. It became less a place of waiting and more a place of actually living. Vittoria started moving through it with less tension, started sleeping through the night with his arm around me. We fell into rhythms: morning coffee while he worked, afternoons where he'd put the laptop down and actually be present, nights that were tender and necessary and completely honest. For 5 days, it was almost peaceful. On the 6th day, everything shattered. I was in the kitchen when Vittoria came in with his laptop. His expression already shifted into something dangerous. He set the computer on the table without speaking and walked away. The email was open on the screen. "Vittoria," it read, "I thought you should know the truth about your girlfriend. Her name isn't Aria, or rather, Aria is her real name, but it's not the name she was using when she was working for the Moretti family's intelligence division. She was a plant. Castellano sent her to you. When you met her, she wasn't a stranger in a coffee shop. She was following orders. She was gathering information. She was the reason Gabriel died. How do you feel, knowing that your great love was actually your enemy all along?" My stomach dropped into freefall. "That's not true," I said. My voice sounded very small in the sudden silence. "That's a lie. Castellano is trying to—" "Is it?" Vittoria turned to face me, and his expression was completely blank, completely controlled. "How did Castellano know to contact you at your coffee shop? How did he know your routines? How did he know you were vulnerable, jobless, desperate, alone? How did he know you'd respond to a beautiful man offering you something better? He didn't. You did. You were the one who— I was the one who saw a beautiful woman being watched by his operatives. I was the one who tried to save you by being selfish." He ran his hands through his hair, and the gesture was violent. Desperate. Fuck. How did I not see it? You came to the warehouse. You helped me escape. You made yourself visible at the party. You proposed the strategy with Castellano. You were there for every decision I made. Because I was protecting you. The words came out broken. Castellano was using me, yes, but not the way that email suggests. He wanted information, so I gave him nothing. He wanted me to report on your plans, so I fed him false intelligence. I've been working against him since the moment you brought me to that safe house. Vittoria's laugh was bitter. How convenient. And how am I supposed to believe that? How am I supposed to know that everything you've told me isn't another layer of manipulation? That our entire relationship isn't just a long con to consolidate power? The words hit like physical blows. Because, I said quietly, I could have left. When you gave me the option in that warehouse, I could have driven to the airport and disappeared. I could have claimed I was a victim, gotten witness protection, started over somewhere safe. Instead, I chose you. Even knowing who you are, what you do, how this would end. And maybe that's the most intelligent move of all. Staying close, making me care so much that I'd never question your loyalty, making me weak. I felt something crack inside my chest. You don't believe that, I said. I don't know what I believe. He moved toward the laptop, typed something I couldn't see. I'm going to have people investigate. I'm going to find out what you did, who you reported to, what information you passed along. And depending on what they find, I'm either going to forgive you or I'm going to... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I'll wait for your answer, I said. I moved to the bedroom, packed the bag I'd prepared weeks ago, and set it by the door. I won't run. I'll wait and see what your investigation finds, and I'll understand if it doesn't find what you want it to find. For hours, I sat on the bed listening to him work in the other room, making calls, asking questions, methodically dismantling everything to check if it was built on lies. Around midnight, he appeared in the doorway. Marcus didn't send that email, he said quietly. It came from an anonymous server. Could be Castellano. Could be someone inside my organization trying to destabilize me. Could be someone I haven't thought of yet. Okay, but you worked for the Moretti family. That part was true, wasn't it? The email got at least that part right. I looked at him. Yes, I was low-level intelligence. I mapped building layouts, attended events and reported conversations. Nothing that would endanger lives. And when Castellano started working with me, I tried to minimize the damage I was doing, but I was complicit. I was part of the machine that killed Gabriel. The words hung between us. I know, he said. He looked destroyed. That's what makes this so fucking painful. Because the truth is, you were never innocent. And I was never going to be the kind of man who could fix things. We were always going to be two damaged people trying to build something real out of violence and deceit. And I was always going to have moments like this where I wondered if any of it was real. Is that a question? I asked. It's a statement, he said. It's the acknowledgement that we're never going to be able to trust each other completely, that there will always be doubt. And I don't know if I'm strong enough to love you despite that doubt. Then don't, I said. And it cost me everything to say it. Let me go. Make it clean. Let me leave, and you can move forward without wondering if I'm sabotaging you. He crossed the room in 3 steps and pulled me against him with the kind of desperation that suggested he was drowning. I can't, he said roughly. I'm too weak for that kind of mercy. I can't let you go. I can only stand here and hate myself for it, and you for making me this way. Then we're both trapped, I whispered into his chest. Yes, he agreed. But I'd rather be trapped with you than free without you. We held each other in the dark. 2 people built from damage and deception, and desperate, terrified love. And somewhere in the city, someone was planning the next move. Someone was always planning the next move. The attack came at 3 a.m. I woke to the sound of breaking glass and Vittoria's body leaving the bed. He was moving before consciousness fully caught up, pulling a gun from the nightstand and positioning himself between me and the window. Bathroom, he said. Now. I didn't argue. I moved, and he followed, pushing me into the marble bathroom and locking the door. The sound of gunfire started immediately from outside, from down the hallway. Multiple shooters, multiple entry points. Stay in the bathtub, he said. He was already moving, climbing into the bathtub and pulling me down beside him. The bathtub was against the interior wall, the safest position if the windows exploded. Stay low and stay quiet. The world became percussion, gunshots, shouting, the sound of destruction. I could hear Vittoria's phone buzzing with messages, could see him typing responses one-handed while his other hand held the gun steady. How many? I whispered. 12, maybe 15, from multiple organizations, coordinated attack. His jaw was tight. I should have seen it coming. Castellano's elimination created a power vacuum, and I've been so focused on... He stopped himself. On you. He'd been about to say on you. The fighting continued for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Vittoria's team was good. His men were positioned throughout the building, were prepared. But the attackers were desperate, the kind of dangerous that comes from knowing they might not get another opportunity. A bullet came through the bathroom door, low and fast. It missed us by feet. Vittoria didn't hesitate. He fired back through the door, not trying to kill necessarily, but trying to slow their approach. There's another way out, he said. His voice was completely steady. The window in the bedroom. Fire escape. We go now. What about your men? They'll handle it. Our job is survival. We moved. It was coordinated and brutal and efficient. Vittoria covering the doorway while I slipped past the broken bathroom door, moving through the blood-splattered bedroom toward the window. The fire escape was old, metal, covered in snow. I climbed. Behind me, I could hear more gunfire, could hear Vittoria laying down cover fire so I could reach the next level. The night was chaos, sirens in the distance, shouts echoing between buildings, the smell of cordite and fear. We made it to the street level, to an alley, to a car that was somehow already positioned for escape, keys in the ignition, engine running. It was Leonora in the driver's seat. "Get in," she said. She looked unfazed by the violence. Of course she did. She'd grown up in this world. Police are 5 minutes away. We drove through the pre-dawn city, Vittoria's hand finding mine in the back seat, holding on like it was the only real thing in the world. "That was inside," he said quietly. "Someone in my organization called the hit. Someone gave them location, timing, security details. Someone I trusted gave everything." "How do you know?" I asked. "Because the timing was too perfect. Because they came from the building next to the safe house, which means they knew which building we were in. Because this organization has been my life, and I know how these things work." Leonora glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "It was Marcus," she said. "He was planning a coup. He wanted to destabilize you so he could consolidate power. I've had someone watching him since Castellano. When he made contact with the rival families last night, we flagged it." "Why didn't you tell me?" Vittoria demanded. "Because you would have moved against him, and that would have been obvious. Better to let him move first, see his full hand. Now when you respond, it's defense, not aggression. You hold the moral high ground in the organization." Vittoria laughed, and it was a terrible sound, the sound of something human being stripped away. "The moral high ground," he repeated. "In this life. That's the cruelest joke I've ever heard." We were moved to a third location, a brownstone in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. It was furnished. Someone had prepared it. The organization was moving like an organism, protecting its head. I went to shower while Vittoria dealt with the aftermath. The water was hot, and I washed away blood that wasn't mine, dirt, the smell of fear. When I came out, he was sitting on the bed, fully clothed, gun on the nightstand, staring at nothing. "Marcus asked for asylum with the Bonaventura family in exchange for intelligence about my operations," he said without preamble. "They're organizing a takeover, coordinated, from multiple fronts. They're going to move within 72 hours. Then we fight," I said. "We?" He looked at me. "No, we get you out. I won't put you through this again." "You don't have a choice," I said. I sat beside him. "I'm not leaving. I'm not running. I'm standing with you, and we figure out how to survive this." He pulled me toward him, and his body was shaking. This man who'd been cold and controlled and dangerous was falling apart because the stakes had become too high. "I've done terrible things," he said into my hair. "Things that deserve to destroy me. And maybe this is that destruction finally happening. Maybe this is the consequence of every life I've taken, every family I've destroyed, every decision made in blood. Maybe," I agreed. "Or maybe this is just what comes next, and we deal with it." He pulled back and looked at me. "How are you so calm?" "I'm not calm. I'm terrified. But I'm also 17 steps ahead of panic, which is where you taught me to live." He kissed me then, and it was the most vulnerable kiss we'd ever shared. Not passionate or desperate, but tender and heartbroken and honest in a way that suggested he was finally letting me see how much I mattered to him. "I love you," he said, and the words sounded torn from him. "I love you even though it's destroying me. I love you even though I know it's dangerous. I love you even though—" "I know," I said. "I know, and I love you too. So we do this together." The war lasted 4 days. It wasn't like the movies. There was no grand final battle. Instead, it was a series of calculated strikes, economic pressure, political maneuvering. Vittoria's organization fought on every front simultaneously, taking back territory from the Bonaventura family, neutralizing Marcus's supporters within the operation, securing alliances with neutral families. And I watched. I stood beside him through late-night strategy sessions, helped him analyze intelligence, offered perspectives that his all-male organization sometimes dismissed, until Leonora backed me up. I became something more than a girlfriend. I became a strategic advisor, a symbol of his willingness to think beyond tradition. By the 3rd day, it was clear Vittoria was winning. Not through violence, but through strategy. He'd turned 3 of the Bonaventura family's main supporters against them, by offering financial incentives and political positions. He'd systematically dismantled Marcus's support network. He'd positioned his people in key locations across the city's underworld. Power was flowing back toward him like water finding its level. On the fourth evening, the Bonaventura family called for a meeting, neutral ground, diplomatic immunity, which meant no violence would occur on the premises. Vittoria prepared like he was going to war, dressing in a suit that looked like armor, checking weapons, reviewing strategies. "I'm coming with you," I said. "No." He didn't look at me while saying it. "You wait here. You stay in the brownstone where you're safe. That's not how this works anymore. I'm part of your power structure now. I'm part of the calculation." He turned to face me, and his expression was devastated. "I can't risk you. You already are. The moment I stood beside you at the party, the moment I spoke to Castellano, the moment I helped you plan against your own organization, I became part of the risk. I moved toward him, and I'm choosing to stay part of it. So you take me, or you explain to every family why you've lost control over your own household." It was a manipulation, and he knew it. But it was also the truth. He brought me. The meeting was held in a private dining room at a restaurant that Vittoria owned. 5 members of the Bonaventura family sat on one side of the table. Vittoria, myself, and Leonora sat on the other. The patriarch was a man in his 70s, silver-haired, with eyes that had seen decades of violence. His name was Carmine Bonaventura, and he looked at me with the kind of appraisal that suggested he was calculating my worth as a chess piece. "You've done well," he said to Vittoria. "Better than I expected, given your distractions." He gestured toward me. "The girl is a liability, but she's also proving useful. She represents stability, continuity. She suggests that even in chaos, you're planning for the future. Very smart." "Thank you," Vittoria said. His voice gave nothing away. "I'm going to make you an offer," Carmine continued. "A ceasefire. I remove myself and my family from the takeover. You stabilize your organization. In return, you cede control of the financial district to my operations. We split the port equally. You give me access to your European connections. And most importantly, you legitimize me as an equal power in this city." Vittoria didn't respond immediately. The silence stretched. "No," he finally said. Carmine's expression didn't change. "Excuse me?" I said no. "I'm not going to cede territory. I'm not going to split anything. And I'm definitely not going to legitimize you as an equal when I'm going to own this city within 6 months." The temperature in the room dropped about 50 degrees. "You've already lost," Vittoria continued. 3 of your main supporters have switched allegiance. Your finances are being strangled by banks that now support me. Your supply chains are being intercepted at multiple points. You thought you were winning because you had numbers, but you forgot that I think about the game 5 moves ahead." "And what about the girl?" Carmine asked. He wasn't angry, he was curious. "What if I decide she's not worth the risk? What if I remove her from the equation?" Vittoria's hand found mine under the table, squeezed it once. "Then you die," he said simply. "I'd lose millions of dollars, years of careful planning, and multiple territory holdings. But you'd die, and so would every person in this room. And I'd be willing to make that trade." The statement hung in the air like a declaration. Carmine smiled. "You've changed," he said to Vittoria. "This woman changed you. 6 months ago, you would have made the smart play. You would have accepted my offer and neutralized me later. Now you're making decisions based on emotion. Now I'm making decisions based on what I value," Vittoria corrected. "And that's new for me. That's transformative. And you're right, it's a liability. But it's also the thing that makes me willing to burn everything down rather than live in a world where she's not safe." Carmine stood. His family followed. "You're going to lose her eventually," he said. "You know that, don't you? This world doesn't allow for happy endings. It takes and takes until there's nothing left." "Probably," Vittoria agreed. "But she's worth the cost." He left. In the car on the way back, I couldn't stop shaking. "What did you just do?" I asked. "You could have made a deal. You could have consolidated power through negotiation, instead of escalation. I chose you," he said simply. "I chose to make a statement that I'm willing to sacrifice strategically if it means protecting you. That means no one will test me. No one will threaten you because they'll know I'll respond with absolute destruction. That's insane." "Yes." He drove through the city with controlled precision. "It's also the most rational thing I've ever done. Because love isn't rational, and I love you. So I made a decision that tells the entire underworld that I love you more than power. more than control, more than profit. And that means you're the most dangerous person in this city, because they know that threatening you is equivalent to declaring war on me. We returned to the brownstone, and that night, for the first time since the violence had started, Vittorio let go completely. His walls came down. He held me like I was the only solid thing in his life, and we made love with all the tenderness and fragility of two people who'd survived something together, and would probably have to survive worse. The epilogue came 3 months later. Vittoria's organization had consolidated power. The Bonaventura family was out of the city. Marcus was dead, not by Vittoria's hand, but by his own. He'd realized too late that he was going to lose everything, and he chose the only exit available to him. The underworld had restructured around Vittoria's new power base. He wasn't just a boss anymore. He was the boss, the undisputed leader of the criminal organization that controlled the city's underside. But something had changed in him. He started divesting from the violent operations, consolidating power through legitimate businesses and political influence instead. It was slower, less immediately profitable, but it created the kind of stability that meant violence became a last resort instead of a first one. "You're softening," Leonora observed one afternoon. We were in Vittoria's new office, legitimate, above board, decorated with art and books. She had her feet propped on his desk, completely comfortable in a way that suggested sibling relationships transcended criminal hierarchies. "It's disgusting." "I'm being pragmatic," he corrected. "Violence attracts attention. Attention attracts law enforcement. Legitimate operations allow me to protect what matters." He glanced at me, and the look contained a lifetime of meaning. "Speaking of which," Leonora continued, "I'm giving you 6 months' notice that I'm moving to Europe. I'm tired of this city. Too many ghosts. I want to rebuild somewhere that doesn't remind me of Marcus or Castellano every time I turn a corner." "Take whatever you need," Vittoria said. "I'll establish you in Vienna. You'll run European operations. You'll report to no one but me." She smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." After she left, Vittoria pulled me to him. We were standing by the window of his office, looking out at the city that had tried to destroy us, and had instead built something between us. "I have a question," I said. "Ask. Are you happy?" He was silent for a long moment, considering the question with the kind of seriousness it deserved. "No," he said finally. "I'm too aware of what I've done, too connected to the violence, too committed to a world that's fundamentally unhappy. But I'm less destroyed than I was, and I have something to protect that's worth protecting. And every morning I wake up and I'm grateful for it instead of strategizing about how to use it. So that's something." "That's something," I agreed. He pulled out a small velvet box, and my heart did something violent in my chest. "I'm not going to do this traditionally," he said, "because nothing about us has been traditional, and because I want you to know exactly what you're agreeing to. You marry me, you become a target. You become a symbol that rivals can use against me. You become complicit in a world that trades in violence and corruption. You'll never be able to leave without leaving half your soul behind." "Is this a proposal or a warning?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Both," he said. "But mostly it's a promise. A promise that I will spend every moment of every day trying to be worthy of you. A promise that I will protect you with everything I am. A promise that whatever comes next, we face it together." He opened the box. The ring was simple platinum with a single diamond. Not ostentatious, not designed to intimidate, just honest. "Yes," I said. "You haven't heard the terms. I don't need to. I already know them. I've lived them, and I'm choosing them anyway." He slipped the ring on my finger, and it felt like a pronouncement, a declaration, a choice point in a life that had been nothing but choice points since I first walked into that coffee shop. The wedding was 6 months later, in a private ceremony at the penthouse that had started all of this. Not many people attended. Leonora from Vienna, a few of Vittoria's most trusted lieutenants, one of my university professors who'd helped me rebuild my architecture career. There was no traditional wedding dress. Instead, I wore a black gown that reminded me of the dress from the party, but deeper and more honest. Vittoria wore a suit that fit him like a second skin. We exchanged vows that had nothing to do with conventional happiness, and everything to do with the specific happiness of two damaged people choosing each other despite everything. "I vow to love you," I said. "Even when it's complicated. Especially when it's complicated. I vow to see you clearly, all the violence, all the choices you've made, all the ways this world has marked you, and to choose you anyway. I vow to stand beside you when standing beside you is dangerous, and to remind you that we're more than the worst things we've done." He took my hands, and there were tears in his storm-colored eyes. "I vow to be better than I was," he said. "Not because I believe I can be redeemed, I don't. But because you exist, and you matter, and the least I can do is try. I vow to protect you with everything I am, even when protection means letting you go. And I vow to love you in a way that's honest and terrifying and completely without restraint." We were pronounced married by someone Vittoria knew, a lawyer, technically, but someone who'd been brought into this circle and understood what we were and what this meant. That evening, as we lay in bed in the penthouse where everything had started, I asked him the question that had been forming since the coffee shop. "Do you regret it? Do you regret that night when you decided to approach me?" He held me closer, his chin resting on my head. "Every single moment," he said, "and not at all. You've disrupted everything. You've made me weak. You've made me question decisions that I'd been confident about for decades. You've turned me into the kind of man who cares about another person more than he cares about power, and I would make the same decision 1,000 times over." "Even knowing how this ends?" I asked. "Because this is the underworld, and happy endings are manufactured myths, especially knowing how this ends," he said. "Because however it ends, at least you were part of it. At least the story of my life includes you. At least I got to love someone in a way that was completely real." I fell asleep against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling safe in a way that I'd never been safe before. Safe not because the danger had passed, but because I'd chosen to face the danger with someone who would face it with me. Epilogue. 1 year later. The apartment is different now. It has plants. It has photographs on the walls. It has the kind of lived-in quality that speaks to permanence, rather than temporary shelter. Vittoria is working from home more often, managing operations through his legitimate business channels, keeping the violence at arm's length. His organization is the most powerful in the city, but it's also the most stable. There are fewer deaths, fewer dramatic conflicts, just power, flowing like water around obstacles. I've rebuilt my architectural career. I'm designing buildings, real buildings, structures that will exist for decades, that have nothing to do with the underworld and everything to do with creating something beautiful. Sometimes people ask me if I regret the choices I made, if I regret getting involved with a criminal, walking into danger, surrendering my safety for love. And honestly, the answer is no. Because love isn't supposed to be safe. It's supposed to be dangerous and honest and transformative. It's supposed to break you open and rebuild you as something stronger. Vittoria walks through the door now, wearing a suit that looks legitimately tired, carrying a briefcase that's filled with contracts instead of weapons. He kisses me without asking, a gesture so familiar now that it feels like breathing. "Bad day?" I ask. "The usual," he says. "Politics, money, the constant threat of someone trying to dismantle what we've built. But I came home, and you're here, and nothing else matters as much as that." I lean into him, and we stand in our apartment, the one we chose together, the one we're building a life in, and I think about coffee shops and dangerous eyes and the moment everything changed. I think about the choice to stay, and I know, with absolute certainty, that I made the right one.